Yo, what's going on? What's going on? I'm out here tonight, rolling solo. Uh just getting ready, man, just to I guess briefly graze over my Pittsburgh Steelers and just their current status uh since they've been bounced from the playoffs. So I won't hold you guys any longer. I guess the first thing first for me is um this is a team, man. This offseason was picked to finish fourth in the division, and they had a chance to win the division. Um, and I think my guy Mike Tomlin's catching a lot of heat, and I think there's definitely some aspects of this, rightfully so. He's the head man, so he should catch a lot of heat for sure. But I think there's just a lot of things that just didn't go right for them uh, right out of the gate. One of those things that I think really showed its head in the playoffs, and I think over the last 5 games when they were on their losing streak, um, was not having a number two wide receiver. Man, this offense is an offense that um, they're gonna run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, and then they're gonna try to take the top off with splash plays and. Not having somebody who could get yak definitely it definitely hurt them for sure. That's one of the biggest calls. Like I think that's a place. I know there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of fans obviously talking about um, areas that they needed to upgrade in, or positions and whatnot. And definitely wide receiver too is definitely one of those positions that they have to look at. And I think they definitely have to look at getting someone who can make some yards after the catch for sure. That's one of the reasons why when the NFL draft was going on, a lot of conversation about Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuels. I know Debo didn't have a great year, but that's one of the reasons why I was so excited about the potential of getting Debo Samuel, was just because I thought somebody that could get some yak, I thought would have definitely been a huge difference maker for this offense for sure. Um, the other thing too is just people talking about things need to change with Tomlin. I definitely agree. Again, like in some aspect, but I think one of the things, like as Steeler fans, we have to keep in mind just doing like a little bit of research. Obviously, the quarterbacks. I'm not including Patrick Mahomes in this category in the Kansas City Chiefs, because they're a whole different entity. But I'm just gonna rattle off some names for you. Obviously, or some team names, right? Seattle Seahawks when Russell Wilson was their quarterback. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, obviously with Tom Brady at quarterback. The New England Patriots with Tom Brady at quarterback. Those and the Denver Broncos when Peyton Manning was on his last leg. Those are all teams that have won Super Bowls, within the last 10 years, right? That kind of fall into the same space and category as being Roethlisberger as far as like an age or, a generation piece, right? And those are all teams that are still looking for quarterbacks, man. I mean, the Seattle Seahawks have Geno Smith, and you can make the argument that Geno Smith has been playing good football over the last 2 or 3 years, but it took him a greater part of his career for that to happen, right? So there's that. I think obviously the New England Patriots are still trying to get it right at quarterback. I think they got some hope with Drake May, and it looks like that's going in the right direction. Um, and then the Denver Broncos, the same thing, right? Bo Nix, the rookie, just now, just now made the playoffs, right? So I think like for Steeler fans, I think like we're a little aggressive, and I think we need to kind of just take a step back and just think about the fact that, like, hey, we have been relevant. I know there's been a lot of conversation today on on sports radio and obviously on X and stuff like that. Right there is Mike Tomlin, is he overperforming in the regular season and under delivering in the postseason? And the only one, man, I will say that, like, he definitely deserves deserves heat for is that Cleveland Browns one. He definitely deserves heat for that one because that was just piss poor. But if you look at these other teams, man, if you look at a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, Kansas City Chiefs played in 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls, man. You know what I mean? So, like, all right, cool. Buffalo Bills last year, they had a chance to win that game. If it was not for Deontay Johnson fumble, I do believe, inside the 10, they had a chance to keep that game close. So again, and then obviously, what happened on Saturday night. Saturday night, I just think everything just came to a head, right? Like, and that's the next part I want to talk about is just where the Steelers have what they've done in the draft. 2018, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. 20, yeah, let's see here. What we got? 20 2018. 2018 was the last draft that really smoked these guys, man. And I'm pretty sure that draft class right there had, I think that might have been the year that they only had a second round pick, if I'm not mistaken. Um, no, actually, I take that back. That was the year of Terrell Edmonds, Mason Rudolph, James Washington, right? Like, James Washington had his moments with the team, but Terrell Edmonds, man, that was a huge miss for sure. And right around this time frame, 2017, they smoked it though, man, with TJ, Juju, Cam Sutton, James Conner, Josh Dobbs. Like they smoked that draft. That was a really good draft for them, for sure. But 2018 in 2019 really left a lot to be desired, from a draft side of things, man. I mean, Deontay Johnson was obviously the best player in that group. Zach Gentry, he hung around for a little bit, got some reps. Isaiah Buggs, he hung around a little bit as well. But again, nothing to really write home about. Devin Bush was a bust. Obviously, after the Ryan Shazier injury, like that, they had to try to figure out something at the middle linebacker spot, and they did. And it didn't work. So they took a big swing and miss. 2020, I I'm a Minka Fitzpatrick fan. I am. It took me a while to kind of come to that. I think he played really good football when Ben Roethlisberger went down that season. Uh, but you also had a 30 plus year old quarterback on the wrong side of 30 anyway, coming off of a major elbow reconstruction surgery. And they chose not to address the quarterback position. This draft did yield us Alex Highsmith, did yield one of the best guards in football in Kevin Dotson. We just weren't able to get that out of him. So that's a coaching element for sure. Alex Highsmith, the cream of the crop, right? We were able to take Chase Claypool and obviously flip him for Joey Porter Jr. So there's some things that you could definitely say worked out in our favor as far as that goes. And I believe in 2020, I think that was also the year, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the year that Jalen Hurts came out as well, if I'm not mistaken. And that could have been an opportunity for us, to grab a quarterback, man. I mean, at that point, like really, what does it really hurt at that point? You know what I mean? For us to draft a quarterback later on in the draft as a backup, we didn't have a plan at the quarterback position, and I think it's obviously starting to show now. All right, 2021, not a bad draft class, right? I think this draft class, and I'm probably going to catch some heat for saying it, but it is what it is. We got rid of James Conner to draft Najee Harris. Okay. All right. It's cool. Najee's a great locker room guy. Pat Freiermuth, who I think, like, I love Pat Freiermuth as a football player. I just think that I think our expectations are just a little bit too high for him. I think he's just this generation of Heath Miller. He's a really good football player. He's a solid tight end. But I don't think he's anyone that is a game changer for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, and that's okay, man. Like that's all right. But like, I think you look at like an offense and, you're looking at those two players, they don't yield a lot of explosive plays. And I think that's one of the issues that I do have with this team now is they don't have the explosiveness that they had. And like, I'll say yes with the killer bees, because obviously, man, like Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, like special talents, right? Special talents. And like, we just don't have that. Like, we haven't had that in a while. And, just to call a spade, this offense has not been the same since Antonio Brown pulled, what he pulled in Cincinnati and didn't play. This offense has never looked the same. Ben Roethlisberger was on a mission to try to right some wrongs that the following season. He got hurt in the Patriots game, only played 2 football games. And it was really kind of downhill from there. They had some moments. They had a moment where they were 11-0 during the pandemic year, I believe. And then, they ended up kind of flaming out and ended up losing against the Browns. Our 2023 class, I like. Broderick Jones, man, highs and lows. Joey Porter Jr., big fan, but obviously the penalties. And I just want to talk about him for a second and just the cornerback position. they have missed so bad in some of these areas as far as defensive back, just in the defensive backfield period, right? Like they've missed it in that position for sure. So to finally have somebody that is at least a competent corner, I think obviously gives Steelers fans a lot of hope for sure. Um, Nick Herbig, I think obviously every Steeler fan knows there's a lot of really positive things to say about him. And then we got, Mount Washington, which, again, I think he's just one of those guys, man. He's a better real life football player. Um, and it's somebody that could do some things, but I still don't think we've utilized him as much as we possibly could. Again, man, he's right in there in the rotation with us for sure. And then, like, this draft class this year, the 2024 draft class, could go right down through the list: McCormick, Peyton Wilson, Frazier, Fontu. Like, I think again to be patient, man, just because like all of these essentially that's an entire offensive line, right? Um, and so with that being said, like we're playing a bunch of rookies up front. We're playing a bunch of rookies. We played two of them anyway, for sure. Can they get better? Absolutely can get better. But the biggest thing I would say, man, right now is just the fact that like the Steelers, they don't have a quarterback. And I think that's no secret, right? You cannot win in this NFL now without a quarterback. And I think to be in a situation where you have Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson, it's boomer bust, man. It's boomer bust with him for sure. I don't think he's the answer. And Justin Fields, I think he gives us a better opportunity schematically because he brings the athleticism, but obviously our passing game is going to suffer because of that. And again, if you can't throw the ball in the NFL, you're gonna be in a lot of trouble. And some other just call outs as well for me, man, is really since 2017, and Todd Haley being the offensive coordinator, this offense hasn't been good. It hasn't been good at all. And I can see the same thing about the defense in regards to Dick LeBeau and him being the last competent the last competent defensive coordinator that we had. We let Brian Flores walk out the building. So obviously shame on us for that right there. But I just think like it's not the end of the world, man. It's not the end of the world. I don't think we have to start, trading guys like, TJ Watt. I've seen, some things about that, trading TJ Watt and some other pieces too, man. It's like the Steelers found themselves in a situation after, after the Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, Martavis Bryant, LeGarrette Blount, kind of after all of that, they found themselves in a situation where they were no longer going after the most talented player, but they were also trying to make sure that they had quality people inside their locker room. So I think, and George Pickens, I know there's probably a lot of people are like, well, what about George Pickens? All right. But like that was one of the things, man. Kevin Colbert could find a wide receiver every day of the week and twice on Sunday with his eyes closed. Guy couldn't draft a defensive back or he could draft a defensive back to save his life. And like those are areas that like we needed. And some of this too, I think there's another narrative that people forget, right? And one of those narratives that was presented was, Ben Roethlisberger not wanting to be pushed in terms of like having a backup that, could be forecasting a shadow over him. And that the team is paying for it dearly now. And I think again, man, like in that same breath, you don't just find Hall of Fame quarterbacks on the street. And as Steeler fans, like we were spoiled for, however many years it was with Ben Roethlisberger as our quarterback, and understanding now that like, he's an all-time great. And we don't have that. Like we don't have that. And you just don't find that. And, the other part of this too, man, is like, the Steelers, man, they got a business to run. They have a business to run. And they have a product to put out on the field. And, for all of us, on-chair GMs or Madden GMs, if you will, you don't just start blowing this thing up because they're a lot closer than they are further away. And, there's always talent later on in the draft for sure. And they used to do a really good job at hitting those day 2 picks and hitting those day 3 picks for sure. So like, I don't, like I said, I don't think the world is, I don't think the sky is falling. I don't, but I think for people, the criticism of Mike Tomlin, 100%, I think, yeah, we do need to hold them to a high expectation. But again, man, I heard Ryan Clark talking about it. I mean, in the same breath, like if we do that, man, and we blow up this roster and send Mike Tomlin to New York or, or whatever, all of a sudden, man, now you're a 5-win team. And people ask, what does Mike Tomlin do? I don't think there's another coach in the NFL that could have held together what he held together through those years with, the Killer Bees. I don't think so. And the other part of that is there's a level of respect that I think all these guys, they need. And I think, he gives them that for sure. But like, as far as like drafting and things like that, man, like you got to think like when the Steelers were missing in these drafts, not having a first round pick and just completely butchering drafts. In this same breath, teams like the Cincinnati Bengals were drafting Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, right? Like they were hitting on those players up top. The Baltimore Ravens were drafting Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, like that. They were drafting those players. And that's one thing I will say about the Baltimore Ravens that I hate them as a fan, but I respect them in the NFL draft because one of the things that they've always done a really good job at, in my opinion, is always been they're going to draft the best football player. They're going to draft the best football player. And they always have a lot of talent out there. Picks like Artie Burns, man, like those are terrible picks. Those are terrible picks for a lot of different reasons. Terrell Edmonds, like terrible pick. He had his moments where he played okay, but that 2016 draft class for the Steelers, Artie Burns, Sean Davis, Javon Hargrave was really the best pick out of that group. Great defensive tackles, had some health problems, but like he was the best player there. Tyler Matakevich, he's been a journeyman in the NFL, but again, linebacker, he's had his moments. I think it's more about, for me, and I'll wrap it up here, but I think for me, man, it's more about the Pittsburgh Steelers have not been set up for success via the draft over the last 5 years. They've had 2 draft classes in all reality that have been relatively solid here recently. And last year's draft class, I think the 2024 draft class was really solid. I think the 23 draft class was pretty good as well. But then even like when you look at 22, right? Like, man, like you draft a quarterback in the first round and you miss on quarterback, that typically sets a team back significantly. It sets them back. And it hasn't with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It hasn't set them back significantly. Yeah, they're still a relevant team. And obviously George Pickens in the second round is I think is still a really good player, man. And I still believe in him. As a talent, I think he obviously has some growing up to do, but I think that can change, depending on what the wide receiver room looks like next year. I think that can change. Calvin Austin, I think, has been relatively solid in terms of the special teams. He's made a couple of splash plays for us this year. I think Connor Hayward was just, a love pick. The Marvin Leal, he's been in there sometimes. Mark Robinson was somebody I thought that maybe could have done a little bit more. But again, man, we're getting into round 6s and round 7s when we're talking about those guys. So for me, I just think that, the things I would like to see from the Pittsburgh Steelers going into the offseason, just to kind of summarize it, I would say if Arthur Smith does get a head coaching job, I really would like to see the Pittsburgh Steelers take a shot on a young upcoming offensive coordinator. I just think there's a lot of guys that are out there that offensively could help us from a creativity standpoint. I think about guys like Josh McCown. Obviously has a lot of experience playing in the NFL. I think quarterbacks, you're seeing it with Kevin O'Connell, may not be reflecting right now on the scoreboard for the Vikings, but they just do a better job offensively, schematically. So like, I think, that's a name like, I definitely would throw out there. I know Mike McCarthy now is gone, from Dallas, but it doesn't look like they're going to move off of, I don't expect them to move off of Arthur Smith unless he gets a head coaching job. But the defensive coordinator, that's something that's got to change on that side of the ball. I've said it all year long that the run defense was really scary for me because there were points and times in the year. And I'll even go back to the Monday night game, I believe, against the New York Giants when Tyrone Tracy was starting to gash us. I think those are things, right, that, they start to show up. They'll show up again. And then obviously, man, you got one of the biggest, baddest running backs in the NFL and Derrick Henry for the Baltimore Ravens. And you almost kind of knew that was going to come after the first time they played, and he only had 12 attempts. And they really didn't have to use him as much in the second meeting. And that's what they brought him in there for, right? Like they're making moves. Those teams, or at least the Baltimore Ravens, are making moves to say, like, hey, man, to go win a Super Bowl. The Pittsburgh Steelers attempted that this year with Patrick Queen and Deshaun Elliott. They attempted that. And those two, Patrick Queen had his moments. Deshaun Elliott was a really pleasant surprise for sure. Obviously, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, two different quarterbacks for us in the room. But Russell Wilson, like, to go back, he's not the guy that he was, and you can see it. He's, in his late 30s. He doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have the mobility. He looks like he's still continuously seeing ghosts. I'm not sure exactly what was going on earlier in the year with Justin Fields in relation to, him throwing the football. But when I think about, like, what this offense needs, for sure, I think they definitely need a wide receiver who can get them some yak for sure. Like, that is absolutely something that has to happen, and somebody that can move the change, because everything with George Pickens, it's 20, 30, 40 yards or nothing. That's what we get. And I think you see with Pat Freiermuth, they tried to slide him into like that number 2 wide receiver role, obviously, due to the lack of options that they had in the passing game. And I just don't think he's as athletic as we want him to be, or is that we may think he is as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Like I said, I just think he's this generation's of Heath Miller, and that's not a knock on Pat Freiermuth. It's not. But Heath Miller also had the luxury of playing with, Hines Ward, Santonio Holmes, right? So, like, he had an opportunity to kind of blend in and not have to be one of the vocal points. And again, playing with a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? So I just think, like I said, man, for me, that's what I'm thinking about. And from a contract side of things, I love Najee Harris as a person. I love him in the locker room. I think he's great. I think he stands for everything that the Pittsburgh Steelers are. I know he's had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. I know there was a point in time where he led the league in explosive runs. It might have been last year. But, like, we have to have somebody who is an electric game changer, and we just do not have that in any aspect of the offense. And until we get those type of players, like, we're going to be in a very similar situation. And I think defensively, like, they got to change some stuff up schematically. Like, they have to. That part was definitely disheartening. So overall, for me, man, I think the season was a win again, just because you start off the year being picked fourth to be fourth in the division. They had an opportunity to win the division. They did win the division with a 36-year-old quarterback, a third-year wide receiver, 2 rookies starting on the offensive line. I mean, what else would you expect? But I just figured, hey, man, my first year doing content, and really just getting on here, spitting some game, I guess, about my Pittsburgh Steelers and my view about where they're at. I'm always going to be a Steeler fan, ride or die, no matter what. So it will be an interesting offseason, to say the least. But hopefully we address that wide receiver 2 position, get a couple or get a player or two that not only can move the chains, but someone who is a potential home run threat in some capacity, whether that's wide receiver or running back in the NFL draft. I love what they're doing offensively, building from the inside out. Defensively, like, we just got to be able to stop the run. I think that's the biggest piece. And I don't want Aaron Rodgers. I don't want Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback. I don't want Kirk Cousins as my quarterback. If anything, just give me Justin Fields, us running back, and see what we got. All right. That's all I got, man. I appreciate you guys giving me the time here this evening. I'm going to get back, finish watching this Monday Night Football game, and I'm out.